So Jenny, why don't we want to turn it over to you and we can get going here this morning, and we can start with our land recognition as you do so well.
For sure, let's do that. Thanks for joining us, everybody. As Craig said, wherever you are joining us from, we're very grateful to see you in here. And as is always important to us, we'd like just to take a moment. SAIT always acknowledges that it is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Today, that encompasses the indigenous people of the Treaty 7 region, the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Northwest Métis homeland. SAIT also acknowledges all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. This traditional land for all of us is a place where we all walk in the footprints of the Métis people. As Craig said, today we're going to talk about collaboration this morning. One thing for everybody to know, we've got lots of people in here who have been coming week after week. Welcome back. We're very glad to see you again. And we have some new people this week as well. So a quick note, if you have a question, we love that. This is unscripted. So pop your questions into the Q&A. And on that note, if you see either of us looking slightly to the left, that's where we keep the chat, and that's where Craig will have the Q&A as well. So if we're looking that way, there's no way we're doing our emails. We're just tracking you and trying to keep the conversation all about you. Our title this morning is Collaboration, and at SAIT we have a collaborative intelligence course. We can talk for half a day, a whole day, and quite frankly, we could talk for a week on this topic. It's become a real buzzword. And really, at some points, people refer to it as a value. People refer to it as a competency. There's some articles out there saying this is a must-have. But truly, the question is, what is it? And how do we do it better? And I think that's probably enough from me to start with, Craig.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Jenny. And yeah, for those of you joining us for the first time, if you're here for the first time, throw a number 1 in the chat just out of curiosity. And to Jenny's point, if there's something with respect to collaboration that you want to make sure we address, wow, lots of ones popping up here. So that's fantastic. Welcome to all of you. But if there's something around collaboration that you want to make sure that we try and get to or put into the discussion, please do throw it into the chat or into the questions. Obviously, something about this topic triggered you to join us this morning. So very happy to get to those. I guess for me, Jenny, this is an interesting one. A couple of years ago, I think this was probably all over the cover of Harvard Business Review magazines. I didn't have that copy. So if you want to know how to emerge from the crisis, that's a good one to read, by the way. But collaboration, maybe we should start right off the bat talking about what it is and what it isn't, and where to go from there, right? Because I think there's oftentimes, organizations or leaders sometimes put out collaboration as, this is a good thing. We're going to collaborate, folks, and everything will be better. But, it's not that simple. So why don't we start with, what it is or what it isn't?
No, it's not simple. And it's interesting. Yes. Yay. Let's collaborate. So what I did here, and we don't have a slide for everything, but the disguises of collaboration, because you're spot on, Craig. We've had a collaborative conversation. Actually, no, we haven't. So here's 3 things. If you're a leader out there, or even if you're wherever you sit, these are the things to watch out for when we sort of use that term abundantly, collaboration. The first one is, it's not a tug of war. It's not a case of my job is to win and bring you across to the light side. Roberta, I'm sorry, I couldn't find my stormtrooper outfit. I know you're in here and that was your request for today. But that's one of the first things that collaboration isn't about, is dragging people across. When you hear the expression, go build some consensus, go get some buy-in, what you're doing is you're pulling people across to a decision that's already been made. Some of you will have heard this phrase from us before. I think we've had it here on a Friday. And hippo is a term, I think Google started it. And they had a poster that said, beware of the hippo, and then Corporate Rebels. And we can put this in the resources that we send out afterwards. Corporate Rebels did a fantastic article called Beware of the Hippo. Hippo is an acronym, and hippo stands for the highest individual paid person's opinion. And so, Craig, if you go into a meeting with your team and everyone sits down and you say, right, I have this great idea, blah, 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 what do you think? That's what we call coercion. That's not collaboration at all. And then the last one, and unfortunately, I could not find an image of a super chicken, but there's your cartoon image of a super chicken. And this is where we get all the experts in the room and it becomes just a fight of egos. And that's not collaboration as well. I mean, one of the things we should say is collaboration is not nice by any stretch. It's a little bit scratchy and it's definitely uncomfortable, but it's not a case of sort of beating down and arguing with other people's egos at all. In fact, in that sort of line, the super chicken piece comes from Margaret Heffernan, fantastic TED talk. If you haven't seen it, here's another quote from her as well. And so in its simplest way, collaboration is when more than two people get together to work on an agreed goal, agreed target, agreed purpose. I think when we're talking about workplace collaboration and the way that we most frequently use it, what we're really talking about is when we show up and believe that somebody else has something to offer. And so immediately we're kind of in that mindset piece there, because if I think that everything I think is brilliant, not so much for you, we're going to have a really hard, or I'm going to have a really hard time collaborating. I've got to believe that you have something to offer.
Yeah, interesting. And, for me, what I have seen not work well, and Roberta, I see you have a question here. We'll get to it in a second. But what I have seen not work well is where you have leaders who say, okay, team, I want you to collaborate more. Go do it.
Okay.
Right? Without really talking about, what is the purpose? Why do we need to collaborate, right? Does every situation need collaboration? Right? There's a lot of layers to that one. But, I think how, as leaders, do we want to make sure we're setting the stage properly for our teams to be able to collaborate effectively? And then there's so many, for me, there's so many subpoints on this one that I could dive into, but I think what I'm getting at is we have to figure out at the start, how are you going to do it? Why would you do it? And can you just say, okay, go collaborate?
Go play in the sandbox. No. And again, you're spot on. Like, that's brilliant awareness that a lot of people don't even think about, because the term sounds great, and go have a good conversation. Like, who wouldn't say no? Or who wouldn't say yes that way? Who wouldn't say yes Friday?
Yeah.
But you bring up some really good points, and it's a learned skill. Like, that's the key to it. And underneath that sort of title of learned skill, there's a whole list of skills. Listening, empathy. How do you ask a good question? And in fact, the book Beautiful Constraint goes one step further and it says, how do you ask a propelling question? And in a propelling question, you have to have a bold ambition and a significant constraint to put the two together. And that's a question that forces you to think differently. So listening, empathy, questions, the basics in communication. A lot of us aren't very good at even just that basic communication piece. And there's more within there. And then the other piece is this mindset piece. And Karen Dawson from Deeper, Funner Change, she has a brilliant way of putting it. She says there's 3 things we need for good collaboration. The first one is we have to be completely aligned on what our purpose is. What is the end that we're trying to get to? What's the goal that we're trying to reach? The second one is a yes and mentality. Now, this has been around for a while. Daniel Pink has it in one of his books. It pops up everywhere. So rather than no but, or we've already tried that, those are killers. We say yes and we open up the possibility of conversation again. It's one of those things that's really easy to sit here and say. It's really hard to do when you're in one of those scratchy, sort of tossing around the ideas, collaboration conversations. But the third one that she has that people, I actually think people find this the hardest, and we don't set ourselves up for success, is essentially, my job is to make you look brilliant. And again, we're like, well, why not? This should be easy. There's that word, should be easy. However, if you think about a lot of companies, you and I work on the same team. Our performance management structure probably has us in competition against each other. So this is a really difficult piece for leaders, because we're vying for a bonus, for a mark, for a whatever it might be. And yet that poor leader is being said, you've got to create a highly cohesive performing team here. And so the two it adds friction into that mix. And so I think when we can sort of get that in a different part, a different bucket, if you like, and really knit into how can I make you look brilliant, then we change the line of the conversation.
Yeah, very interesting. I think I have an easier job of making you look brilliant than you do of me, but that's a different, we'll just put that aside. So I want to come back. There's 2 or 3 questions here, but I want to come back to bold. You said something that I never heard you say before. Bold expectations or bold, what was that term?
The propelling question.
Yeah.
So the book is Beautiful Constraint. I'm testing myself here and it's not behind me. I think it's Adam Morgan. It's Adam Morgan and somebody who wrote it. Really, really good read if you like to read. But they talk about how do we make those constraints? Like, this is a big thing in collaboration, actually, because a lot of the time we work within the constraints. We're like, oh, well, we don't have enough money. Well, we can't. We'll stop there. Our budget's been cut. We can't do it. And so that kills any collaboration straight away. And so part of their process is, how do you set that propelling question? And the 2 things that you need for propelling question is a bold ambition. So set your expectation right up there. We want to run a conference that's world class. And then a significant constraint is the piece that potentially could hold us back. That's a bit that could shut us down. We don't have the budget for that. But with this propelling question, okay, how do we make that constraint beautiful, in their words? And so how do we run a world-class X with a budget of X? Gotcha. And then the next piece right from there simply has to be, well, we can if. Same as yes and. And then that sets us off to talking about it as if it was possible. We just look at it from a different angle. Okay,
very cool. And I see Allison and Reva have both put links to Beautiful Constraints in the chat, so thank you both for that. And okay. The old improvisation, yes and. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can't help but chuckle at that one for those of you who happen to be Arrested Development fans. Anyway, I'll leave that one alone. So Roberta, to get back to your question around collaboration, how to manage expectations that not all ideas will or can be implemented, and how to communicate that in an open way. So within the realm of collaboration, obviously, I think perhaps what you're suggesting, Roberta, is that when you're coming together to collaborate, is that you're going to have all sorts of ideas come forward, right? And how can you manage that not all of them will be implemented?
I think the easiest way is literally is just to say it. And so so rarely is collaboration a forced hour of conversation like this. And this is another piece that we want to do. We book an hour in the time slot and everybody shows up either on screen or soon maybe we'll be all in the room. We're like, right, go, we've got an hour, let's get it done. Doesn't work like that. So here's the problem that we're trying to solve. As we go through this, what we're setting is those terms of engagement. We talked about this in psychological safety, probably in our meetings, that very first one that we did. And so, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Here's X in terms of terms of engagement. And here's something that I want you to know. The value in this conversation comes from every single person around the table. And any of you out there listening who have hung out with me before know I like to use that beach ball. And every different stripe of the beach ball is a different perspective. It's a different way to see things. So as a leader, the value in this conversation is you don't see this the way that I will see it. So I really want to hear everybody's ideas. I really want to hear those out there, crazy ideas, because from that kind of mix, we're going to take the seeds and we're going to build something that's great. That means we won't be able to include everything that we put out there today, but we will have a really good conversation and build that as we go. And I think if we're collaborating properly, if I have what I think is a brilliant idea and a tiny pieces of it is taken, if I have been heard in that conversation, then I'm more likely to be okay with that. I might be disappointed. That's okay. I think my idea is brilliant. And we talked about that in emotions last week. There's the empathetic piece in that skill in there.
Perfect. And we got to thank you from Roberta. So I think we hit the mark on that one, Jenny. From Chelsea, building on a question that was asked here, but how to have collaboration while also recognizing and managing that not all decisions can be made by committee, right? And so that's an interesting one because, and I, Chelsea, if I'm missing the mark here, please do throw it in the chat and let me know. But I think there's this, sometimes there's this expectation that comes with the word collaboration, that this is just this beautiful experience that we're all going to have, right? And everybody gets together and has their input, and we're, it is collaboration and consensus at the same time, right? But how do you have collaboration? Again, I think it kind of ties a little bit with what we were talking about on Roberta's question there. But is collaboration necessarily decision making too? I guess is something else that could be built into this.
Yeah, I think the black and white answer is no. And again, those are our boundaries. That's our terms of engagement. And so, it depends on the culture of the organization. It depends on the definition of leadership. It depends really on what the conversation is. And so the best times to collaborate are on those sort of out there, when we want to change something, when we want to get to somewhere new, when we're stuck. Those are great times to collaborate. And we need to remember where the decision sits. So as the leader, you might have to make that decision. But then your collaboration conversation is, I want to hear from all of you who are involved. I want to understand this better. And so that allows that sort of piece. And this is a key. Are you prepared to have your decision changed? If you go into that conversation thinking, okay, this is what we're doing, that's a waste of time. Because unless you're prepared that your decision might be moved, or your thought process or your mental model, whatever it might be shifted on that. And so, some people say, do we collaborate too much? As you said, Craig, everybody wants to do it because it's trendy and it's kind of cool, and it means that we can hang out together, and we're craving that connection and that conversation. But sometimes that's taking up time that we could spend on better conversations or different conversations. The consensus piece, I think consensus sometimes has to come from collaboration. And so if we start all the different sort of sides that we're at, and we get to somewhere and we get that agreement so that we can leave the room, however many conversations down the line we are, happy with where we're going, that to me is where the consensus comes in. But I don't want to be told this is the way we're going. If I've had my piece, then I'm happier to go that way.
Fair enough. So sometimes though, you do have to tell people this is the way we're going.
Yeah, you do sometimes.
Okay. No,
and that's a good piece too, because there's a day job here. You got to get on with the day job. Like, seriously, we don't get the day job done, we're not moving, let alone moving up and forward. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, well, it's very much the equivalent of analysis, paralysis by analysis, right? The whole concept of collaborating and debating just because it's fun to do it, but never accomplishing anything. If you're not going to create something or move something forward by the act of collaborating, why the heck are you even doing it?
Yeah, which brings us back to what we were saying before. What is that defined goal? Where are we going to? Yeah. And that gives us that piece within there. Yeah,
absolutely. So Chelsea, hope we got that one for you. Great question here from Lisa. As a leader, what behaviors foster a culture of collaboration, and how do we lead by example?
That is interesting.
I'm afraid this may take up the remainder of the time.
No, we'll be good.
No, it's good.
Actually, I'm looking at the slides. As you well know, we do some in advance, and I think this is a really good place to start. Let's see if we can make it work today. Number 9. There we go. All right. So, actually, my friend April out there might recognize this lady on the screen. It's my friend reffing at the 2012 Olympics in London. So kind of key is it's Olympics today. More to the point, the question asked there, as a leader, first thing to remember is you're going to get what you tolerate. And this is a really good piece to remember, because one of the skills that we want in place, one of the things that you can help your team with the most is picking up on the behaviors that don't elicit collaboration. So one of the things with collaboration, we talked about this in psychological safety as well, is we want intellectual friction high, social friction low. So at any time when the conversation gets personal, you hear somebody shoving someone into that shame spiral or that shame circle, and that's anything like you're good enough, you're not good enough, your idea is not good enough, you're not smart enough to be here, etc. Passive aggressive behaviors, that verbal eye roll. Any of you have teenagers out there, we know what that looks like. Silence, what's going on when somebody's being quiet? Sometimes that's a great thing. They're thinking about it. They're sort of digesting that piece. Sometimes they're sitting there because they desperately don't agree and they've decided not to speak up in there because for some reason for them it's not safe. And then obviously the outright aggressive behaviors, none of that's going to lead to collaboration. So as a leader, be really careful of what you're tolerating. If you turn a blind eye or don't act on that piece, that's going to kill that momentum and that ability to collaborate. The other piece is sort of picking up on that silence. It's a leader's job to create the space for voice. We use that phrase a lot these days. But what does that sound like? And so, it might be as simple as, Craig, I haven't heard anything from you yet. Do you see things differently, or is there another piece that I'm missing? And so I'm inviting that piece. Know your people, because there are some people, when you call them out by name individually in a meeting, that's going to ruin their entire day. So know your people, know that they're okay with that kind of piece. What about if we all seem to be moving in the same direction, thinking this is a great idea? Let's flip it. What would not be a great idea about this? Why would this not be good for us to take this up and to follow? Or what's another sort of way you can encourage it? So Craig, I think your idea is great. Thank you for presenting it. Can somebody tell me the flip side of this? Can somebody sort of stand against this? Just so we're getting that different perspective in.
Well, you want to avoid the group think.
Yeah.
Right.
And to go back to Lisa's original piece too, as a leader, is that listening piece, that empathetic piece, being prepared a little bit to stand back, not to be the hippo, and to let everybody else do the talking first.
Perfect. So Lisa, if that hit the mark for you, please just drop us a note in the chat. And I think Allison, this one probably touched on your question as well, which was, at times your team can indicate they want a collaborative discussion, but when they come together, there are crickets.
Yes.
Right. So, there could be a lot based on what we were just talking about there, Jenny, with psychological safety and so on. There could be a lot of layers as to why those crickets have emerged. But I don't know if you've got any other thoughts on that one for Allison.
Well, yes. So in fact, I noticed Reva's just popped it into the chat. There's psychological safety is huge. So that's the first piece. And if you missed that one, let us know. Craig will send you the recording. Yeah. But the other thing that we can do is companies have worked a lot of ways in making it a nice place to work, which actually isn't all that helpful. And so one of the things that really helps is encouraging constant feedback, constant feed forward. And so I'm quite the fan, I think it's the Navy SEALs who call them after action reviews. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it forces the conversation. And an after action review is 3 or 5 questions. It simply starts with, what did we set out to achieve? What did we actually achieve? And what caused that to happen? And you can, if you want, take it further. So what have we learned and what will we do differently next time? And sometimes actually it's a really good idea for the leader to get out of there. Let your team have the conversation, but make sure that it's written down, because what we're trying to do is shift that mental model of how we act. When we're doing that piece, same rules as we just saw before, can't be personal, it's got to be task-based, all those sort of pieces within there. And I have seen someone, I'm not sure who did it, the before action review. So what do we intend to achieve? What might get in our way? How will we know? And what will we do if it does? And then what we're doing is just opening up that conversation and making it just part of our process and our conversation within there.
Very good. Questions keep coming in here, Jenny. So from Shauna, I'm an individual contributor who often collaborates with large teams of leaders, senior leaders. How do I respectfully and confidently inject my voice into the conversation, especially when the discussion often gets overtaken with the hippo effect? Well done on bringing the hippo effect into the question, Shauna. So thank you for that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, first off, if you've been invited to that meeting and you've chosen to go, you have value. So take confidence in that value. And that's a slightly different conversation in that personal self-belief and self-confidence, but you have value. Secondly, there's a really potentially an important piece here. And I love the fact that you're invited as an individual contributor. If you're sitting here as a leader, I mean, we don't talk about this too much these days because people seem to have shifted. You know, the days when we used to have the management meeting, closed door management meeting, and they're talking about all the stuff that's happening down there. They've got nobody who's actually in the action in their meeting. So if you've been invited to provide your piece within that collaboration, there's definitely a value and an impact within there. So that's the piece that allows you to speak up. Have confidence in what you're adding to the conversation and know that there's that beach ball piece again. Your perspective is going to be really different. And so I think it was Shauna who asked the question. You know, I find myself in your shoes a lot of the time too. You know, as far as SAIT is concerned, I'm an adjunct instructor. Okay, so we have an entire hierarchy that sits above us down here. But I often end up in those conversations as well. And it's taken me a while to learn this, but I'll hand it on to you. I know that the way that I see SAIT's world is so different to the way that somebody else can see it who holds, even Craig's position. Okay, his audience goes that way, mine goes that way. So when we get to have that conversation, we can bring that together. So it's just remembering that you add a different piece to that conversation, and that's valuable. If the big hippo voices are holding that conversation all the time, you know, virtually, you can put your hand up at any time. I think you can put your hand up in here too, actually. If it's face-to-face, you might physically have to make it known that you've got something to add to it as well.
Yeah, and I think the third piece I would add to that as well is, you know, critically evaluating at some point whether you are there because you truly wanted there for your input, or if you are there because the collaboration is really a false sense of involvement to say, we collaborated with everybody.
Okay, I don't think I did this last time, but that was brilliant. You can have that one. Right there. Yeah, and so true. But so true. I love that. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. It took 6 weeks. I finally got a point in, so that's good. And Riva, I noticed you had a good comment in there as well. This is obviously, so I had a somewhat cynical view there, right? I will admit that. But Riva, you know, puts in a great tactic here around building up your allies that may be in that group, right? And rightly so, right? Whether it's, you can look at that as being political or not political, but it's the same with any group or any team, you know, having allies above, below, at the same level in the organization goes a long way in helping you in those situations. So great point there. Linda wants to know when your book is coming out, Jenny. Just I think I've asked you the same question. So a couple more questions here. How do you handle a team member who doesn't want to assist other teammates achieve a set goal? So I'm going to just put a little commentary on this one around, you know, are we looking at collaboration in terms of it working towards a set goal? Right? There's some nuance in that question, but I think maybe I could take this a little bit bigger. Try saying that a few times quickly. Of what if you have folks who don't want to collaborate, right? Listen, just let me do my job. I don't need to get involved. I don't want to collaborate. I know what I'm supposed to get done. Let me do it.
Yeah, you get asked this all the time. You know, I just have the person who wants to do their day job. They don't want to reach for anything different, etc. Ideal world. It's hard without context in each situation, and we can talk about disagreements, a slightly different piece there, I think. if they really don't want to be a piece of it, my first question is, do they have to be a piece of it? And so, often when we're talking about collaboration, we're building something new, we're innovating. And, we get scared by the word innovation because we think we have to be like Apple and create the next game changer. We don't. We're making something better tomorrow, a better value, better opportunity tomorrow than it was today. And so collaboration often sort of sits, we said this already, just outside the day job piece. And so if somebody doesn't want to be a part of it, do they have to be a part of it? As a leader, your constant check-in is that's continuous. So, pandemics are a really good piece within this. Some people are at their ultimate stress level. They're still doing childcare because the camps aren't in abundance this summer. They're working to their full capacity. Don't give me anything else. Okay, that's fine. We'll fill you in on what the conversation is. We'll fill you in on what the decision is. And as a leader, I'm really going to check that you're sure you don't want to be a part of that. Have that conversation. That's an important conversation. Yeah. If you go in this collaboration conversation, like you're already in it and you're getting that resistance, that's slightly different, but it definitely needs to be unpacked. And, when we're looking at that, a couple of things, like very often someone who's resistant or someone who's sort of negative to something, they've often been let down before. And we don't like being let down. And so that protection goes up. And depending on who you are, that protection is going to go up in a number of different ways. It might be that silent, I'm not contributing. It might be that disengagement. It might be a full out verbal onslaught. But actually, if somebody disagrees with you, that means they care. And so if they, let's just reset that a second, because if you actually have the notion to disagree with me, I'm like, okay, you care about the conversation we're having. I need to embrace that. And I need to find out more.
That's interesting. I never thought of it from that perspective before, right? I guess the scariest situation might be if you had an entire team who said, yeah, we could get together and talk about it. We don't have to, right? Yeah. That ambivalence would probably indicate you've got a bigger issue than if you had, at least if you had everybody say, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
That's something to dig in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It kind of goes to the question of, what or who should be collaborating, and do we need to collaborate on everything? And how do you establish those ground rules? Does it need to be leader driven? You touched on it earlier, I think, in a comment of, folks don't need your leaders to lead the collaboration, right? You and I are on the same team, Jenny, and we wanted to collaborate on something. What's stopping us from doing that? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Does it need to be this? I think that's part of the problem sometimes when these things end up on the cover of Harvard Business Review. It becomes suddenly a much bigger, grander idea. It gives it more perhaps perceived complexity than what there really is in it. Right. And so maybe, I don't know, any thoughts on how do you foster that kind of just team level of collaboration necessarily without the leaders involved necessarily?
That was a good question. Yes.
I know it wasn't in the speaker's notes. I know.
I think the important piece is one, knowing when we need to collaborate. So that's a piece of team culture right there. Some teams just won't. This isn't something that they need to do or that happens often. Know your people too. So my personality type is, put me in a room with somebody for an hour in a conversation. I'm going to go from here to there really, really quickly if they want to have a conversation with me too. Like if that's kind of a meeting of the minds, the amount that we can cover in an hour is incredible. And so if I'm on your team and you've got a couple of people like that, I wouldn't be stopping that kind of conversation, because we're going to be thinking of new ways that we can do this, new ways that we can do that. there's that connection that people crave. When I leave a conversation like that, I'm an inch taller. I'm excited. I want to get stuff done, and I go get stuff done. But do you need to be there? No. In fact, you're going to slow the conversation down, Craig. I don't want you in there, because then there's just the 2-3 of us that can do that piece.
Yeah.
We have to, I think, if I'm hearing correctly, it comes back to, we've got a day job to do the day job. But where these things are able to happen, make the most of getting other people's perspectives, seeing where they're from. And I think, to me, that's what collaboration comes down to, is that conversation.
Yeah, and I think there's also a piece of being deliberate, right? I think what I'm taking away from this too is, I think collaboration is often just a word that's thrown around of, we're going to work together, we're going to collaborate, versus, to your earlier point of, why why have we decided that this topic needs us to come together and collaborate around discussing it, answering a question. It even goes back to some of the concepts around, what type of an agenda for this meeting is this? Is this info sharing? Is this a decision meeting? Is this a gather feedback, right?
Yeah.
What's the point of the collaboration? Are we collaborating for one of those three things, right? Do your teams go into collaboration thinking that a decision is going to be made because of the collaboration, right? And so what expectations are you setting in that? Or are you really just getting together, perhaps sometimes to share best practices, right, under the guise of collaboration?
So with the heading back, and some teams are back full on face-to-face, some are hybrid, some are virtual. I find the language is coming up more and more in terms of, how do we convene? When do we get together? Because we have to stop this back-to-back meeting culture. It's literally finishing people off. And so there's two different types. There's push communication and there's pull communication. So if I'm pushing information, that's coercion, okay? Or that's the, see it my way, we're doing this, come this way. We probably don't need to be in that conversation together. In fact, it could be an email, a Teams message, we can go down that route. But the pull suggests, I want you to be a part of this conversation. And the minute I have that pull, I need your input, I need you to be a part of that conversation. That's an opportunity where we want to be doing this on screen, or, if that's the way that it's going to be, this face-to-face. And then as a leader, the really key piece in there, and you just said it, what is your relationship with your agenda? Is it possible? I think I have this in our takeaways too. Could your agenda just be a list of questions? And then to come back to what you said, what's the terms of engagement? I'm not making a decision on this until 3 months down the line, but I really want us to throw it around so that we can get to that. We're going to change it. Let's go beyond the ordinary and make something different.
Yeah. Lyle, I see that. Good comment there. I'm glad we hit that one for you ahead of time. Lisa, interesting. I've been in those situations before where you kind of get a mandate from above to get something done, and then you talk about needing to pull people together to discuss it, and you get this whole pushback of, why do you need people? Like, why do you need to bring the team together to discuss it? We don't have time or the money to do that. So it kind of goes, there might be a bit of old school, new school in there, and that, why do you have to have this big collaboration event? Just make a decision and move on, right? You've been stuck in those situations before where you're kind of put between the team and the news from above saying, how the hell am I going to get to there when I know that there's going to be questions from here if we don't figure out how to work through it? So there's a few more questions here. I'm not sure we're going to get through them all. We will answer everything either live or in the follow-up. But one caught my eye because it has chicken and egg in the question. And thank you, Melissa. Are high levels of trust needed before great collaboration can happen, or does deliberate and thoughtful collaboration create trust?
It really is a chicken and an egg.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think the answer is yes. It's both.
I mean, no?
Yeah. So you got to have the trust to start with. For me to speak up, to give you my idea, to know where we're heading with that piece, you do have to have that level of trust to start with. And so that comes back to other bits that we've been talking about too. Let's just stamp that collaboration. No, let's spend time building that psychological safety, because collaboration is the last level of psychological safety. There's 4 levels. And so we've got to keep having the conversations. And as we build social capital builds the trust. So as we build the trust, then we're going to find a shift in those collaborative conversations. And it comes back to that, my job is to make you look brilliant. My job is I've got you. You've got my support. I've got you back here. And as a leader, that's our number 1 role in those meetings. And so we're sort of, by doing that, we get rid of those useless behaviors, the passive aggressive ones, the personal attacks, because I've got your back and I'm going to make sure that this sticks with the task. And, that's an interesting perspective. I've never thought of it like that before. Can you tell us just a little bit more about what you're seeing and what you're hearing there? And just keep opening that up. And if as a leader, I don't tolerate the nonsense and I do support you and say, let's hear some more, or whatever that piece is in that conversation, and building trust at the same time. So you kind of, what does it do? It compounds as you build it or something. I don't know what the expression is.
Yeah, no, very good. Melissa, I hope that helped. And I think for me, and Shadin, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Maybe if it doesn't start with trust, at least start with good intention, and then trust builds from there. And I think that was actually touched on in a Harvard Business Review article that I shared prior to this. Comes from Pixar. And if you haven't read the book Creativity Inc., it's a great book to read. But go into a collaboration session assuming that everybody there is coming into that session with the purest and best of intentions to create a better situation as a result of being there, right? And I think that's great intention. If you assume noble intent, you're probably going to have a really good lens on your conversation. So I know there's a number of other questions here. I promise you we will get you to the answers as we send out follow-up material. But we're coming up on our time, and we always like to kind of close off with one big idea, a couple practical tips, and 3 questions that you can walk away from. And I think Jenny has those. At least I see her looking for this.
Let's head there. No, I do.
Perfect. Yeah. So Aman, April, Jason, Philip, and Charissa, we will get you those answers.
For sure. So our one big idea for today, I use this quote all the time. This is a game changer. And so the big idea for the day is be more interested than you are interesting. And it comes from a gentleman by the name of Mark Goulston. I think the book that this is in is called Just Listen. But we really shift our conversation when we're more interested than we are interesting. And when we put people into a room or into a meeting, we see this happen really quickly. There are a lot of people spending a lot of energy to be interesting. What would happen if we were just interested for a little bit? Even if we were just a little bit more interested. So I'd love for that just to be sort of a takeaway for the week. How does that work for you? What happens when you're more interested than you are interesting? Our 2 strategies, as usual, I get stuck sticking to one. So I've given you a couple in here. The first one is celebrate curiosity. And so, when we're talking about curiosity, we often think when people question us, that's dissent or that's disharmony. Actually, that's energy, and that's people buying into the conversation. So there might be a little reset in there. So what can you do to encourage more questions? And when we have more time about this, there's a whole list of things that we can do to make our questions better. First step, perhaps avoid the why in your question. Everyone who loves 5 or 7 whys is like, what do you mean I can't use why? Start with what or how would be a good place to start. We talked about constraints earlier when we talked about those propelling questions. So, what can you do to embrace the constraints? Don't stop just because there's a constraint. Keep the conversation going within there. And I've already mentioned this one too for curiosity. Could your next meeting agenda be a list of questions? Because now you're asking, and that means people are talking and joining you in that conversation. Our second one is one that people find a little bit harder. We need to get into the practice of inviting active dissent. So as we've said already, psychological safety has to be there for this to work. We've talked about after action reviews and before action reviews, the simplest version, what went well, even better, what would make it even better if, and then those questions. And in fact, after action reviews, I think, is another thing that Pixar does a lot within their brain trust piece too. So when we send those resources out, we can put those questions in there. Leaders, it's your job, seek dissent. Actively go out there and look for it. I think Netflix call it farming for dissent. So when you have a really good idea, go find the people who will disagree with you, or bring the people into your meeting who will disagree. The dissent cards, I love this. This comes from David Marquay. His book, The Language of Leadership, is excellent. He talks about red and black cards. I have, needless to say, look, I've got SAIT playing cards here. But if you have a meeting of 10 people, you have 10 cards, and 8 of these are just your regular sort of playing card. But 2 of them, thanks to my daughter, have cartoon characters drawn on them. And so when we're in a meeting where we want to sort of form that collaboration, build that conversation, hand the cards out. If you get one of the special cards, your job is to actively dissent. Your job is to look at it from the other side. What this does is it gives people permission. So, if you've got that hippo in the room and they say something like, card's making me say this, I just wonder what if. And then I've got that permission. That's my job to do that piece. Keen to sort of note too, anybody can offer that dissenting piece, but the card's job is to dissent. And I think that's a really cool way of sort of bringing in that conversation.
You could always stack the deck and make sure the hippo gets the dissenting card. You
could make that work too, yes. And then the questions for you to leave with today, we're back, I think, August the 6th. I think that's the next one. Yep. So between now and then, who will you make look brilliant today? How can you do that in your meeting today? Set out, make somebody, give them that value. We sync with people, we build trust when we make them feel valuable. As per our one big idea, what could you be more interested in? Whose perspective have you not got on something? This is all just practice and skill building so that we can show up in those collaboration conversations and really offer something to the conversation. And then if you're here as a leader, someone who facilitates, someone who chairs meetings, what is your next pull event? Remember, that's where we want people to be part of the conversation. How are you going to design that? These things don't happen by accident. They require leadership, they require facilitation, and they really require our attention. So let's pay a little bit of attention to that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jenny, and thank you everybody for joining us this morning. To Jenny's point, we're back August 6th, and we will be chatting about performance. There's a lot in that one. High performing teams, performance management, one of Jenny's favorite topics. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. So again, August 6th, we'll be back. I will be sending out the follow-up notes and so on all of this. They probably won't come until Monday. I'm actually on vacation this week and popped out just to join you all and spend some time with Jenny, which is always fantastic. She, I think, has a very tough job making me look brilliant. So, but as we look forward here, if you want any help, conversation, work with SAIT around collaboration, we have Jenny and other fantastic instructors who can help make this come to life in your organization. We are happy to discuss it with you. And with that, have a great weekend and happy birthday, Mom.
That's awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.